You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today we're talking with a woman who made high-level policy in the Bill Clinton administration and who now works to make policy for poor people's benefit. Another of my guests is a former corporate lawyer who has turned her life and skill to the benefit of women fighting sexual exploitation. And the third is a scientist who is forging more pathways for women in science to the benefit of all of us. A mighty three. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. An important headline this past week was that Ireland made history by legalizing gay marriage. I send congratulations to Ireland. I send congratulations to the people of Ireland and to the lesbian women and gay men of Ireland. And yet I feel a bittersweet happiness about this. I'll tell you why. We know that whatever oppression men suffer from, as well as women, is taken more seriously. And of course, men suffer from homophobia. When it's women alone, got a problem. Case in point. There was a young migrant woman known as Ms. Y, the letter Y, in August of last year, who was discovered to be pregnant while being held in the Irish direct provision system for entry processing. She was a migrant. She had to trust the authorities because her freedom and her finances were being controlled in the system. She was referred to the Irish Family Planning Association, a voluntary organization providing information to Irish women about seeking abortions abroad, because, of course, it is totally illegal in Ireland. She is entitled to get that information. That was a hard-won battle. And yet she was told that it would cost her £1,500. That's more than $2,300 US. But she was receiving just £19, about $30 a week under the direct provision system. Well, as the process dragged on, she grew desperate and she tried to commit suicide. She was then referred to a psychiatrist under the terms of the new Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act, and she had to see a second psychiatrist and an obstetrician who were tasked with judging her suicidality. Still, she had to wait. Finally, after a scan at 24 weeks, when they'd kept her waiting and waiting, she was told that she could not access an abortion because now the pregnancy was too far advanced. She stopped eating and drinking, but the health service applied for and received the right to intervene. She was told she would have an abortion in 2 days, but she had to eat and drink to be strong for that, so she did. Then they told her the only option remaining was a cesarean section. It was then performed, and she delivered a male infant. Veronica O'Keefe, who is professor of psychiatry in Trinity College, Dublin, outlined the main issues raised by this case. She said, "I have real concerns that a suicidal woman did not receive an abortion, that abortion services are not available to Irish women who have been raped, that while you may not be at risk of suicide at the beginning of a pregnancy, it's the lack of availability of abortion that puts you at the risk of suicide." Close quote. The Abortion Rights Campaign, a coalition of pro-choice groups and activists, has spearheaded the call to repeal the Eighth Amendment to the Irish Constitution, which bestows personhood on the embryo or fetus and totally criminalizes the procedure. So for now, the laws that control women's bodies in Ireland continue to endanger women's lives. And if we ever doubted that the women's struggle was the ultimate radical challenge to the patriarchy, this otherwise tremendously heartening referendum in Ireland for gay marriage rights should bring that home. And now for our first guest. Karen A. Tramontano is the CEO at Blue Star Strategies, and she provides corporate, institutional, and public sector clients with results-oriented strategies. But even more importantly, She has, in her previous work, played a critical role in shaping some of the most important global policy issues of our time, including China permanent normal trade relations, environmental and labor standards in multilateral, regional, and bilateral trade agreements, and worldwide poverty reduction strategies that focus on creating jobs and employing the decent work agenda. From 1997 to 2001, she served as Deputy Chief of Staff to President Clinton and as counselor to Chiefs of Staff Erskine Bowles and John Podesta. And her White House portfolio encompassed a wide range of issues: international trade, transatlantic relations, etc. In 2001, she served as Chief of Staff for President Clinton's transition and established his office and presence in New York. Ms. Tramontano continues her work with President Clinton through the Global Fairness Initiative, GFI, of which she is founder and president. It's a nonprofit organization working to promote a more equitable and sustainable approach to globalization to ensure that its benefits reach all people. And that's what she's going to talk with us today about. Karen Tramontano. Karen, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor to host you. You have done so much at the levels of real power, and it is comforting to know that there's somebody as principled as you are inside leveraging the work that we do on the metaphorical or literal streets. It really is. I'd like to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now, which is also multiplicity of things, but you're working with former President Clinton through the Global Fairness Initiative, and you're the founder and president of that. So talk to us a bit about that.
Oh, I'm happy to. About 12 years ago, I guess, when I started thinking about creating an organization, which sounds as a daunting task as it was and continues to be. But, I was so privileged and honored to be a part of President Clinton's administration and just experiencing the broad way in which he thought about things and how, he continues to do this, is able to bring people together to solve problems in the global challenges that we have. I wanted to do my little part. And so I started an organization that at its core was multi-stakeholder. So we always work with governments, with private industry, and with NGOs, and civil society broadly. And we go into a country and we look at the economic drivers in that country and what economic, whether it's commodities or services, but what really impacts the poor, such that if you change the dynamics of that, even just a little bit, you could put more revenue, more wealth, shared prosperity into the homes and into the hands of the poor. And so that's what we do. And it's taking a long time. We're now going into our 12th year. But we've seen success after success, largely because, Robin, we listen first and do later. Because the poor know better than anyone what it's going to take to improve their lives. And we only work internationally. We don't work in the United States. And we run about 8 large economic projects a year. And it's just been great. And it's probably one of the most rewarding and gratifying things that I've ever done. And I think that'll be true to the day I die.
Well, it decidedly sounds that way. Give the website for Global Fairness Initiative, Karen.
Sure, it's www.globalfairness.org.
Okay, that's good and simple enough. One of the things we've been saying, even in the United States, is that if women got equal pay, that would in itself go a long way toward, and in fact even literally solve, what's left of the economic crisis. So if you look at that internationally, what you're doing is absolutely crucial to women's rights as well as to the economic stability of a country.
We work largely, GFI works largely in the informal economy. I'll just give you one broadly speaking statistic. So most developing economies, most countries that are, formally known as sort of the developing world, or
right,
whatever you have it, where their economies are developing, most of them, if not all of them, over 50% of their economy is informal. Now, what do I mean by that, right? It is, they're businesses that are not registered, or they are individuals who are working in agriculture, but they're not, on the books.
Right.
It's not illegal. It's not people, engaged in illegal activity and drug smuggling or anything. These are people who are working every single day of their lives producing for the overall economy.
Right.
But the government doesn't get the benefit of it. The workers and the small producers don't get the protections afforded by the legal regime of the state, whether
right.
that's in trade law or Social Security and pension or health care. And what we do when we go into a country is we sit with the government and help them to analyze what part of this economy is informal, and what changes in your legal regime and policies can you make to bring people into the formal economy. Give them the benefit of the rights, give them the benefit of the Social Security or health care system, and they will give you the benefit of their hard labor.
Yes.
That becomes taxable income. And so governments, instead of providing services on 40 or 45% of the economy, they're now providing services and benefits to their people on 60, 70, 80, 90% of the economy. I mean, and when you look at India, for example, estimates of over 70% of that economy is informal.
Right.
So imagine if, and of that, to your point, 90% of those informal workers are women.
I was just going to say, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, if a country, I've often used this example, if a country is industrialized and burns fossil fuel, I mean, we won't even go into the environmental implications for the moment. Miners count. Miners appear in the national accounts. It's considered viable work. So when it comes time for benefits, or if they have, for example, superannuation, or, as you well know, those go back to the miners. But in most countries in the global south, or at least in many, women are the fuel gatherers, and they're gathering peat or dung or wood, and it's invisible. It's not considered work, and so of course they get no benefits. They are part of precisely, as so many other jobs are, of the economy you talk about.
Well, no, the ILO, which I've also been privileged to work with for the last 13 years, I guess, as an advisor to the Director General, and now with Director General Guy Ryder, who so understands this economic dynamic. He has the ILO now focusing on the informal economy. I think in their convention in June, it was one of the topics. The conference in June, it'll be one of the topics. They've just passed, the governing body, the Convention on Domestic Workers.
Yep.
Which is...
That was huge.
It's huge. It is so huge. Now there's discussions about ILO Convention on gender violence in the workplace.
Yes.
Violence against women in particular in the workplace.
Yes.
So the ILO is just not only a fabulous institution, takes in the tripartite engagement from workers representatives, from industry, and from governments. It's the only UN sister agency that has those three constituencies at the table. developing these convention, working through these issues, and it just, you cannot underestimate the impact that it has had and continues to have as a modern day institution.
I want to thank you for all the work that you've done and you're still doing and will presumably go on to do. And I hope you'll come back and visit with us again, because although our time is up now, it's frustrating. There's so many more things I want to ask you. Will you come back?
I certainly would, Robin. I'm honored to come back. And thank you so much. And thank you for your life's work and your dedication to make a better world.
We have to take a short break here. It's Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but I'll be back in just a moment with Taina Bien-Aimé, who has been in the front lines of the women's movement for some time, fighting for women's rights at policy levels and in the trenches. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. My next guest, Taina Bien-Aimé, is an old friend and colleague in the trenches. She's now the executive director of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, known as CATW. But before that, she was executive director of the Women's City Club of New York, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit advocacy organization that helps shape policy and improve the lives of all New Yorkers. She also served as the executive director of Equality Now, that great NGO, an international human rights organization also working for the protection of the rights of women and girls. She's been working for women for a long time, and she still looks 22. Here is Taina Bien-Aimé. Welcome to the program, Taina.
Thank you for having me, Robin. It's such a pleasure.
Oh, you're an old friend and colleague in the women's movement, back to the days when you were executive director of Equality Now for a long time. And now, of course, you're the executive director of Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, for short, going by the initials, as it's known internationally, CATW. So bring us up to speed on what CATW is doing these days.
Trafficking is with us and growing, although, as you know, no one really knows how many people are trafficked, not the United Nations, not the International Labor Organization, not our own government.
Right.
So numbers are very hard, and people often get stuck on data and numbers, and is it happening here or there? What CATW does is look at legislative advocacy, ensuring that there are strong laws, that we can support national campaigns for the Nordic model, which is which are laws that focus on the demand for prostitution as a way to combat sex trafficking. But we're also trying to raise awareness about trafficking, because people still think that movement is involved. People still don't necessarily make the links between sex trafficking and the industry of prostitution. So here in New York, where we're based as the so-called headquarters, we focus a lot on general advocacy vis-a-vis the UN or the State Department and our other friends elsewhere. But we also have offices in the Philippines, Latin America, in Mexico, in Europe, where our partners work with victims of sex trafficking as well as policy issues, and work a lot with men and boys as well.
Right. Well, since you mentioned the UN, let's take a minute and focus on that. The listeners to this program know pretty much about the Nordic model. It was on this program that Jimmy Carter came out in white knight, riding to the rescue, joining us in opposition to my grief, to Amnesty International, which has taken a position against the Nordic model, a position that is concerned for the human rights of pimps and brothel owners. Never mind asking why, listeners. It's just, there it is. It's really weird. But one of the things that the pro-sex work industry people have done is also lobby very effectively
and very destructively, I think, at the United Nations for World Health Organization and a couple of other agencies to combat the Nordic model. What's the update on that?
Well, the United Nations is a complex bureaucratic system, and there's this entity called UN Women that governments are supporting to promote and protect rights of women and girls around the world.
Right.
Unfortunately, they have been unduly and sadly influenced by other UN agencies that primarily focus on HIV/AIDS. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, people who focus on HIV or health issues look at harm reduction solely, and they look at issues of prostitution as kind of opportunistic establishments, and I'm talking about brothels, through which people can distribute, or pharmaceuticals and their allies can distribute condoms and antiviral medicine, et cetera, without any type of gender lens or analysis as to what prostitution is, who is the population and who are they being exploited by, the brothel owners, the buyers of sex, etc. So it is extremely disheartening and frightening that UN Women is taking a stance, although they claim it's unofficial. There's this quote-unquote unofficial note that supports UNAIDS and UNFPA's call for legalization of prostitution that is floating everywhere in the universe in UN Women's name. And we have contacted UN missions of governments that support UN Women, the top donors. We have had meetings with, and by we I mean collectively, not just CATW, but other organizations like Equality Now and the European Women's Lobby and countless other organizations.
The European Parliament voted 3-1 for the Nordic model. I mean, it's an idea whose time has come. So.
No, absolutely. And so for UN Women to take the opposite stance is really standing not only on the wrong side of history, but also in great detriment to women and girls.
My theory is, here, listeners, you're listening into Strategy. My theory is that Fumla, who is the head of UN Women and who recently was a guest on this program, I think her heart is in the right place. She's newish in the post, and I think she was sort of snowed by pressure from World Health Organization, which can be pretty pressuring, when you're new in a post at a new agency, and then WHO lumbers in and says, do this. And so I'm hoping that the position that UN Women has taken can be changed and moved. That's my personal behind the scenes hoping and working on.
Well, what they need to do is issue an official statement claiming neutrality, because if you can't stand with the exploited women and girls in the sex trade, then at least, profess neutrality on the issue. They're neutral on issues of surrogacy, for instance, because it is such a hot debate. And so I think on this issue, they should also,
at the minimum,
just put something on letterhead. And because right now the note is being quoted. I was recently in India where a panel was proclaiming support for legalization, quoting the UN Women note.
Oh, dear.
That is deemed unofficial. So it has significant repercussions around the world.
Of course it does. Tell me what else we should know that's going on in terms of trafficking and our fight to end trafficking and prostitution.
Resistance is fierce. I think everybody knows that. And so what we're really trying to do here at CATW is, although the hammering of the Nordic model is key and critical, but with that, we are trying to move outside of our likely allies and branch out. So, for instance, I'm sure you've heard there's a brilliant psychologist, a trauma expert named Dr. Ingeborg Kraus, who launched a petition with leading trauma experts in Germany, where prostitution is legalized, calling for the abolition of prostitution as a way to prevent the severe and egregious damage done to women. And basically, her petition that was signed by really preeminent people from Heidelberg University and other psychologist organizations saying, we can't fix these women. You keep sending them to us. The abuse that they have suffered is just too much for us to bear. And what you really need to do is look at the Nordic model and pass the Nordic model. So we're trying to, we will bring her to New York for the Commission on the Status of Women, and we are hoping to branch out toward the New York-based trauma experts and the medical community to look at the harms of prostitution in ways that people can understand. Because I think what we face is that people don't really, the happy hooker comes to mind.
Exactly. Well, and the sex industry lobbyists and organizers have done everything they can to propagate that image, even unto the term sex worker instead of prostituted woman. So, but that's a very creative approach that you're doing.
It's creative in the sense that we're borrowing from other very successful campaigns. If you look at the anti-smoking campaign, like who would have known 20 years ago that you couldn't even smoke in New York City parks? But what has swayed us is really data as to the harm to one's health. And so I think, we see prostitution as an exception to violence against women, and we also always say that where we are in terms of ending exploitation in the sex trade is where the domestic violence movement was 30 years ago, or even the sexual violence movement.
Right.
And we see the resistance in understanding rape. Well, it's the same thing. Exchange of money for a sexual act does not make it any less of sexual harassment and sexual violence and degradation and humiliation of another human being. But that's what we have to portray in very concrete and targeted ways for the public to understand.
It seems that the Nordic model is gaining a lot of strength both in cities in the United States and in countries abroad. And I think it's an idea finally whose time has come, although it will take a lot more pushing and nudging to get it over the last few yards. Taina, give the website of CATW.
www.catwinternational.org.
Okay, www.catwinternational.org. That's Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. Thank you for everything that you've done for years, and thanks for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live.
Likewise, Robin. Thank you for all your beautiful and brilliant work.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Here are some statistics that will have to hold you until the release of the new Women's Media Center Status of Women in Media report. And they're pretty startling. Very simple. You might call this the illusion of choice. There are, in the United States, 1,500 newspapers, 1,100 magazines, 9,000 radio stations, 1,500 TV stations, and 2,400 publishers, all owned by 6 corporations and 272 executives who control 90% of what 277 million Americans see, hear, and read. Just for the hell of it, and so you can grab your pencils, I'm going to just repeat that. There are 1,500 newspapers, 1,100 magazines, 9,000 radio stations, 1,500 TV stations, and 2,400 publishers, all owned by 6 corporations run by 272 executives. They control 90% of what 277 million Americans, including you and me, see, hear, and read. If that's not surreal, I don't know what is. We better work to make it not real anymore. It's time for another break. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live. And in just a moment, I'll return with a woman who, instead of wringing her hands, as we all do, that there aren't enough women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, is doing something very practical about women and science. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. My next guest is a woman who is actually not just wringing her hands, but doing something about the lack of enough women in science, technology, medicine, engineering, etc. She is the CEO and co-founder of the New York Stem Cell Foundation, and I want to have her back at some other point and just discuss stem cell research, which is fascinating in itself. But for today, she's here to discuss IWISE, Initiative on Women in Science and Engineering, IWISE, which she formed as a working group to address gender equality in science, engineering, and medicine. And she has 7 strategies, very pragmatic, very practical, and we're going to hear all about them. Susan L. Solomon. Susan, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Robin.
I so admire the work that you do in 2 areas. One, I've known about the New York Stem Cell Foundation for some time. You're the CEO and co-founder, and you do really good educative and explorative and scientific work. And now also you're deeply involved in IWISE, which is the initiative of the foundation, Initiative on Women in Science and Engineering, IWISE, bringing together leading women and men in the fields of science and engineering and medicine to address, gender equality, which if we, unless we get it in science and technology and engineering, we've lost the future completely. Tell how that came about, and tell us about IWISE.
Of course. Well, at the New York Stem Cell Foundation, we both support work around the world, and we also have, I think what at this point is probably the largest stem cell research laboratory in the country. And so that means 45 or so scientists, and we need to have the best people that we can, both in our external fellowship and investigator programs and internally in the lab. Mm-hmm. And so we simply we have to make sure that we've got half of the population included and well represented in order to achieve the goals of tackling these enormous problems that are really coming at us like a tsunami of Alzheimer's and diabetes,
yes.
Parkinson's disease. It's just tremendous. I think it's difficult to find someone these days that either themselves or a family member or a close friend or someone that they work with who is not affected.
Well, I myself have been diagnosed with Parkinson's 6 years ago. I've attended some of your symposia, and I'm very interested in stem cell research, so you're absolutely right.
Yeah, Robin, I really appreciate your support in this, because the making sure that the young women and the women who have been working in the field for a while have the opportunities to bring their incredible talent and brilliance to bear on all of the kind of diseases that we're trying to deal with is just critical. And when we looked at our own programs, and that's really how IWISE came about. Kristen Smith and I, and Kristen works very closely on IWISE and our external programs. we thought we were doing okay, but we really could do better. And then we sort of scratched our heads and we said, here I'm a woman CEO running the organization. Kristen, as a program director, is overseeing a number of these programs. What's going on? And we realized that you simply have to have a sort of a continual top-of-mind consciousness about gender equality. It isn't something that you can say, yes, we care about this is really important, and then you just kind of move on and do your work.
You're so right. Oh, brava.
Yeah, I think it's just absolutely critical. And, we have our conference every October. We hold it at the Rockefeller University auditorium. It's a 2-day large international conference. And, we are very focused on gender equality with our speaker invitations. But, of course, what ends up happening is, as people deal with the logistics of the calendar and so forth, you have to continue to keep it top of mind to make sure that the actual program that you have does present women in, and there are brilliant women in the field in substantial numbers. And similarly, in awarding external fellowships and investigator awards and in our own hiring, it isn't enough to simply have it be an assumed part of the culture to believe in and be committed to gender equality. It really is something that at every single moment where you're making a decision to make an award, to make an invitation, to hire someone, that you have an affirmative statement that you either read or is spoken out loud in the case of a jury or at the beginning of a meeting, that you have a commitment to gender equality.
Oh, you are so right. I swear to God, I feel like I've died and gone to heaven here, because if everybody had your attitude, it would be a very different situation. The point is that the sexism and the patriarchal kind of thinking is systemic, the same way racism is. So until we get that entire systemic way of thinking and way of regarding reality changed, then we have to stay on it every single minute. And you're right. People get tired. They think, check that off, move on. Not possible.
That's right. And I think the most important thing, I do believe that while there may still be a few men kind of under a rock who, actively believe in our society, in any event, that, women should not have a role in an active role in the STEM field. I think the vast majority, would be shocked to find somebody saying that, they don't believe that women should have an equal role.
Right. It's unconscious, or it's unconscious, or semi-conscious, or.
Yeah, I would say it actually really is unconscious in the main, and then where it is conscious, it really is just confusion and not understanding that women's voices are higher. They typically don't carry as well as men's, and so it is harder often for a woman to break into a conversation. It's harder for a woman to assert herself if she has a scientific view that's different than her colleagues, without having, again, unconsciously being sort of labeled strident.
Right.
So I think it's, these are the kinds of things that have been talked about, in Sheryl Sandberg's book and so forth. But it's real. And so when we looked at our own programs, we found, that there were a couple of things that we could actually do, and we involved a group of, almost 30 people. We wanted to have a very wide representative group of both political leaders, so Kirsten Gillibrand, and her her team, we have heads of institutions, Rockefeller University, Lori Glimcher, who was dean in Boston, is now at Weill Cornell. Claire Pomeroy heads up the Lasker Foundation, but also Moses Chow, who is a very well-known neuroscientist and has headed up the Society of Neuroscience, which is, I think, perhaps the largest scientific, or one of the largest, in any event, scientific societies, and dealt with it in that society because neuroscience is typically a field with very few women. Very few
that's
women.
Right. That's right.
So I said, actually, Lori Glimcher said to me, we've just all participated in so many white papers. And, if we can't come up with something that would actually be an action plan, perhaps it would really be much better for her to help women by simply raising a lot of money to get the work done. and I said, yes, but let's do both. Let's really do both here. So my charge to the group is I wanted to come up with a small number of high-impact actions that we could actually recommend to funders because that's where we felt
how terrific
the leverage was. We could recommend to funders, and I wanted most of them not to cost anything. So I wanted to have as low as possible barrier to adopting. I didn't want people to say, well, that's a really great idea, but we can't afford it.
This is so smart. Can you give us an example or two?
Yes, absolutely. So, for example, just as I mentioned, simply having a statement at the beginning of any decision-making moment. So that is to say, before you have your review committee, your speaker selection committee, your internal committees. So, for example, what I call the power committees in institutions. Anything having to do with money.
Of course.
Not necessarily policy. A lot of women on the policy committees. But what about the funding committees? What about the audit committee? What about the finance committee? And also making institutions and men and women sensitive to kind of what the levers of power are. So incorporating an implicit bias statement to try to, mitigate really subtle and unconscious gender bias that exists throughout society.
It's basically 2 R's, remind and reinforce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then the next was to create an institutional report card for gender equality that could recommend a set of quantifiable criteria to evaluate institutions on a really specific set of practices which will result in a gender equality grade being assigned. And the Doris Duke Foundation was wonderful to support this because it became a much larger effort and is actually ongoing. And this would, we felt, be compelling to grant-making organizations to require potential grantee institutions to maintain a certain grade to be eligible for funding. Again, we wanted to keep it very simple, keep the criteria simple. We also wanted to make sure it was something we could publicize on our website and suggest that other people do so that, for those organizations that were taking it seriously, they would get the kudos.
Yes, this is just brilliant. Give the website, please, so people can learn more.
Yes, absolutely. So it's nyscf.org, New York Stem Cell Foundation.org, and the initiative is iWise. And I urge people to take a look and contact us. We're happy to talk with you and share what we have learned.
And will you come back at some other point soon and talk more about the foundation? I want to ask, how are you surviving the assaults by the religious right about stem cell research and just the research on stem cell, which I think is probably the key to almost everything, or certainly one of them.
Yes.
And I would love it if you came back and talked more about the foundation and its work. Will you do that?
I would be delighted. Thank you very much,
this is wonderful.
Robin.
Thank you, Susan, and thanks for all the great work that you do, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
It's time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am Robin Morgan, who will reliably be back in just a moment with Fighting Words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back in time for some fighting words. One of my favorite people is not President Ramzan Kadyrov of the Southern Republic of Chechnya, which is basically a part of Russian Federation, even though it's claiming independence. He, in any event, is a close ally of Vladimir Putin. They're real buddies. Kadyrov is a horror. He's been quoted as saying, "I have the right to criticize my wife. She doesn't have the right to do that back. With us in Chechen society, a woman is a housewife. She should know her place. She should give her love to us men, as she should know she's a man's property, and the man is the owner. Here," he went on to say, "if a woman does not behave properly, her husband, father, and brother are responsible, and according to our tradition, if a woman fools around, her family members kill her. That's how it happens," he says. "A brother kills his sister, or husband kills his wife. That's just what happens. So as a president, I cannot allow for them to kill. Therefore, his remedy is let women not wear shorts." You heard me right, because obviously that prompts a woman to misbehave and then to be killed. He has openly defended honor killings on several occasions. He's been accused by both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch of torture of prisoners, even picked up for minor infractions. He's a peach. And he's just now done it again. In an article for the New York Times by Neil McFarhar, he is referred to as the pugnacious president of the Chechen Republic. And he got very upset that he'd been mocked by social media users for seeming to push polygamy. His solution was keep women locked up at home and off social media. "Lock them in," he said. "Do not let them go out, and they will not post anything." Close quote. He had hauled in a group of men and women who are active on social media, who just kept their arms folded across their chests and their eyes fixed on the ground while he harangued them, to lecture them about their daring to criticize him. The scene, which was filmed at what appears to be his government palace, was broadcast on local television, and it was prompted by what Kadyrov, who has long shown a flair for hyperbole, characterized as the wedding of the millennium. Now, here's where the other problem begins. Well, part of the same problem. The social media explosion was set off in Grozny, the capital, when a 17-year-old bride, oh God, was married off to a pal of Kadyrov's, a district police chief who was 50 years old and already married. The first report of the betrothal emerged in late April in the newspaper, and it reported that the police chief, Nazud Guchigov, had ordered the young woman's parents to hand her over by May 2nd, or he would take her by force. What is this place? What planet is this place on? After the article was published, Mr. Kadyrov jumped into action, saying he had investigated the marriage proposal and he found both the young bride, Keda Goylabivyeva, and her family agreeable. Poor Keda. He accused, quote, some liberals, close quote, of stirring up an anti-Chechen tempest. To love all ages surrender, he quoted Alexander Pushkin. And the wedding went ahead. It went ahead a week or so ago. in Grozny with Mohammed Daudov, Mr. Kadyrov's chief of staff, leading a decidedly downcast-looking bride to the altar. I guess her parents would not give her away because they didn't want to abandon her that way. Mr. Daudov, this is the chief of staff of Kadyrov, was later quoted as saying polygamy should be legalized. Kadyrov himself danced at the wedding. He posted a video of it. He said that if the marriage of Prince William and Kate Middleton in England had been the wedding of the century, then this outpouring of interest over the marriage in Chechnya constituted the biggest celebration in 1,000 years. Talk about hyperbole. What about the polygamy problem? We have followed the norms of Islamic law and national traditions, he wrote. But polygamy is illegal in Russia. And Russia, by the way, is a signatory and acceded to CEDAW, the Convention to End All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So, for months now, following this and a series of other episodes, government critics and others in Russia have been asking whether Russian law actually applies in Chechnya. There's a backing and forthing about that because he is pals with Putin. Meanwhile, Pavel Astakov, the Kremlin official who's supposed to protect children's rights in Russia, defended the practice of older men taking young brides. During a radio interview, he suggested, wait for this one, he suggested this was especially the case in places like Chechnya where women were, quote, shriveled by the age of 27, close quote, looking at that age like most Russian women do, he added, at age 50. Well, his remarks prompted another wave of outrage with, goddess love them, hundreds of Russian women in their 20s posting pictures with the hashtag wrinkled women. And Ashtakov at least apologized, lip service only, and stupidly saying that women of all ages were, quote, wonderful and delightful, close quote, not necessarily human beings, but wonderful and delightful other things. The official assurances from Kadyrov and others did nothing to quiet the torrent of ridicule over the marriage. People posted cartoons. The social media network was alive with making fun of him. And so he had summoned about a dozen people who had offended him with their posts and lectured them, as I said at the beginning of this segment. Stop it, he barked, and then suggested that women be locked up, specifically to deny them access to social media. Behave, he said, like Chechens. Honor of the family is the most important thing. Don't write such things anymore. You men, keep your women far away from social media. Now, the Russian women are already on the case of complaining about their government's non-interference, but who can lodge a protest at the United Nations that the Russian Federation, which really does oversee Chechen law, not find this a major violation of children's rights as well as women's rights? It's outrageous. So is he, Ramzan A. Kadyrov. Outrage of the week, and probably longer. And that's it for today. Join us next week when we'll talk with Frady Rice, who is fighting Orthodox Jewish divorce rules, Dr. Jennifer Merez, whose background is in nuclear medicine, and Carmen Gonzalez, who will bring us up to date on environmental justice issues. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com and get the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And also you can find us at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. And be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and on Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton. Senior Producer, Crystal Williams Chancellor. And our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. And the last straw this week is that New Yorkers, in a poll about our mayor, Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio, were kind of meh on him. Why? Because he was too nice. Now, I not only voted for him and have a fondness for him, but especially I voted for him because of his wonderful, terrific, openly feminist wife, Chirlane McCray, who has been a guest on this program. Now, New Yorkers in the past were always complaining about the gruffness of Rudy Giuliani and the rudeness of mayors and the haughtiness of Bloomberg. And so suddenly now, this one is too nice. Give me a break. Give me a break. Forget about it. Don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live. Don't forget about that.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.